Okay, good morning. So today we'll be starting with the crash course, PSIR crash course. So here the basic idea is to cover the entire syllabus within 20 to 22 days from an exam point of view. So here we'll be not teaching you per se political science concept. It will be more about what answer writing approach and how to go through it. So here what we'll be doing is that one will be first revising the quick concepts related to a topic. Then we'll be going through a lot of previous year question to understand what is the themes they've asked in the exam. So one will be the PYQ based themes. So PYQ means which has been already asked. The other is probable themes that can be asked. Means you will have to also know that certain probable areas where the questions can come, means which has been never asked. So for example, let us say you read about Plato, right? They might ask into a question, compare and contrast Plato's philosopher king with that of Machiavelli's prince. So now we'll have to write on the spot. So if you look at the exam pattern or the exam trend, how it has evolved since like last 3 to 4 years, they're making the questions bit more application oriented. So what do you mean by application oriented? You have to be able to write the answer in the given examination hall with whatever content you have. And secondly, here you should also develop the ability of utilizing the content what you have read and try to mold it. What do you mean by molding the content? Molding means whatever content you have, that you will have to be able to change it, shift it according to the demand that has been asked in the exam, rather than just directly writing from your book. That method won't work. You understand? So let us say any notes, how it is designed. So for example, in our class notes or any popular notes in the market, it is largely designed on based on PYQ. So obviously, let us say you write the same content on PYQ, but the question they're asking is not same. It is bit more modification they would have done. So that is where you can say many students why they score less, because they tell we wrote everything what we know, but we are not getting marks. They would have not written everything regarding the demand of the question. They would have just written what they have read in the notes at large. They are not applying it. For that, you will have to develop your thinking abilities. So what we call as brainstorming. What is brainstorming? You should have thought about it. Understand? You should have thought about it. If you have not thought about it, you can't go in an exam hall and write that answer in 7 minutes, because here in PSIR format, totally how many questions you have to write? In an exam, totally how many questions you have to write? You have to write 8 questions, right? So in sorry, how many questions will be given for you in the exam? 8 questions will be given. In that, you'll have to write 5 questions. So obviously, you will have 10 marker question, you will have 15 marker question, you will have 20 marker question. 10 marker question, how much time you will get to write? Roughly around 7 minutes, right? And a 20 marker question, how much time you will get to write? Around 11 to 12 minutes. So the other challenge in writing is that it's not writing the best answer, because it's not like an essay paper where you take 1.5 hour time, think slowly, right? You should be able to construct your answer within 7 minutes or 12 minutes. So it's like you can say a game of chess, that is rapid chess that is being played, that your brain should work very rapidly with developing those structures, with developing the format. So immediately when you see a question, your mind should work. As an example, okay, let us think for an example to just test that how you are prepared. So let us take this year. This year they ask a question saying that the United States of America supports India with regards to China containment policy, but at same time USA does not want to see India's emergence as a leading power. They ask you comment on it. This is like, I think this will come in this year's exam. So obviously now for you to write the answer, let us say it's a 15 marker question and you're supposed to write in how many minutes? 12 minutes or 10 minutes. So here what is the challenges many people face? Now one person will think about, I don't know any scholars. I'm not read Harsh V. Pant, I'm not required. Nobody is asking you to write a Harsh V. Pant or a Raja Mohan, they're asking what do you think. Second, some people, I have not read current affairs. There is no need to read current affairs. You have to at least know what are the recent developments that have happened. You have to be able to quickly interpret the key aspects of the question. So what do you mean by your reading ability, understanding ability of the question should be good. So what is the question demanding? The question is saying in one hand that America does support India when it wants to contain China. So you need to write a bit about in your answer that the closer relations between India and USA or the strategic convergence that has been India and USA largely is pulled by what? Rise of China. So there you need to write certain points regarding how India and America became strategic partners. You can write about Lemova, you can write about Comcasa, ISET agreement, defense deals between India and US, Malabar exercise, Quad. But second part of the question, what it says, at the same time, the Americans do not want to see India emerge as a leading power within Asia. Why? For this, you will have to connect the recent statements, the recent developments. So, for example, you can say when the American Secretary of State, he visited India, he told we don't do the same mistake what we did 20 years before, allowing China to emerge as a competitor. Secondly, you can say that closing ties between what Washington and Islamabad post Operation Sindoor, where Asim Munir was invited as one of the chief guests for White House. Third, you can say many of Washington's policies in South Asia, it is going against India's interest. So for example, they're warming up to the new Bangladesh government with disregards to what? India's sensitivities. Or you can say how they're looking at Nepal completely in a different light, and they're not looking at Nepal through what? India-centric policy. Or you can say their imposition of what you can say sanctions on junta government in Myanmar, it does not go well with India's position. Why? Because it will push junta more towards China. And you can also write out the recent Trump's visit to China, where wanted to improve relations with China. This also goes against India's core interest of a balancing power. Then you have to write about foreign policy is all about what? There are no permanent friends, there are not permanent foes. It is already driven by national interest. In this answer, I don't need to write any scholar. In this answer, there is no need for me to quote 3 different experts. That is what we call, it's a myth. Myth in the sense, even those who have scored well, even they don't know exactly why they scored well. Those who have not scored well, they also don't know exactly why they not scored well. They'll all only work on a myth. Myth in that sense, some people will be say, I didn't add scholars, that is why I didn't get marks. But the reality might be very different. They have never addressed the demand of the question itself. Or some people, problem is that they don't know recent developments. Okay, so in this kind of question, you have to know recent developments. Without knowing recent developments, you can't go write an answer. You understand? So in exam also there are different types of questions that will come. There will be theoretical questions which requires you to link theories and write. There will be very applied questions. Here it's not only linking theory, you have to back your theories by what? Examples. And third, you can say non-theoretical questions. There will be no theory linkage to it. Purely it will be plain and simple. For example, I think 1 year they were asked about, write about India's position of this COP26 Glasgow summit. Punch, Amrit, the 5 principle. Just you need to write about the 5 principle and speak about India emerging as a leading power, etc. You understand? So all questions are not same. You have to get used to knowing which type of question. And all parts of the syllabus is also not same. Okay, so here if we have PSIR paper 1 consisting of what? Part A and Part B. Part A is about what? Western political thought, Indian political thought, and what? political theory. And what is part B about? Indian government and politics. So if you look at part A is bit what? Theoretical. You need to know theories, you need to know concepts well. Not only knowing theories well, you should be in a very good position to interlink it. Get my point? So why some people will struggle with interlink it? See, some people would have just read market notes. Unless you have a political science background, you can understand the background of it, you can understand the interlinkage with it. That is saying you are not from a political science background. What happens many times, you have just read the notes, you have just by hearted, you don't know how to interlink it. You don't know what is the logical connection between theories. So in this paper, to do well, you have to know how to bring interlinkages of theories. You have to be able to connect Plato's idea of justice to what? Theories of justice. You can connect Plato's view on state to what? Theories of state. So Plato and Aristotle's view of state, we categorize them as what? Organic theory of state. At least you have to know what do you mean by organic theory of state. What is the counter theory to it? It is the mechanistic view of state. So unless you are good with theoretical concepts, here scoring well will be always difficult if you don't know the basic theories, if you don't know the interlinkages. And here also one more thing is that you don't need to also add too much of extra content, but here and there it will help. Okay, examples, quotes, because part A is bit what? Quote oriented, right? Most of the questions are also in form of a quote. So your ability to use those quotes very effectively. Got it? And if you take part B, it's bit more applied. What is that? Indian government and politics. You have three parts here. What is that? Historical polity, that is Indian national movement. Then you have governance part, means president, prime minister, this role. Third part, you have political economy. What is political economy? Land reforms, green revolution, etc. Then you have political sociology. What is political sociology? Caste, religion, ethnicity. So here it is not just writing the theoretical part. See, for example, what do you mean only writing theoretical part? So let us think there is a question. They are saying that caste in Indian politics is relevant even today. Comment. One Tom, Dick and Harry, what he'll do? They are not given in our notes only. They are only given about caste. Another fellow will write, Rajni Kothari told that, Yogendra Yadav told this, Pratap Bhanu Mehta is telling this. Forget about who told what. This is not who is saying what. You can make use of them in their argument. Yeah, in introduction you can write, caste is the mosaic of Indian politics. Their question says that, is caste relevant even today? So obviously if they're asking you a question, do you think caste is relevant even today in Indian politics? So that time you will have to write about, first of all, what view is there? There was a modernization view saying that once a country will modernize, that is what you have political modernization, Samuel Huntington, etc. That industrialization will happen, institutionalization will happen, secularization will happen. Obviously what you can say, identity factors will start declining. And that is what some argue, that development has become more important in Indian politics. And for that you can give one or two examples and reasons for it. But then you will have to write the counter argument saying that even if all this has happened, caste still continues to play important role, and you have to give examples and explain in answer how it plays a key role. For that you have to take recent examples and give. So for example, recently government has announced caste census. Secondly, you can also write about in different electoral politics that has happened in different parts of India. You can say ticket distribution was largely based on the caste factor. Or you can say in Karnataka recently D.K. Shivkumar's elevation to the chief minister was also one of the factor was caste factor, that was the Vokkaliga vote bank. And you can also say in 2024 elections, when you say coalitions that happened, you can say in Bihar, etc. Here also it was based on what? Caste coalitions. So hence you can say that, as it popularly said, people in India do not cast their vote, but they vote their caste. Hence you can say caste continues to play a key role in Indian politics. As Yogendra Yadav says, today India is in the phase of what we call as identity plus politics. Get your point? So you have to be very organic when you write. It can't be just plainly from a book you are writing. Again, how many scholars have quoted here? It's fine even if you are using two scholars, but you are addressing the demand, you are giving examples. That is what required. And many of them, why they don't score well, they're just bookworms. What is bookworms? Just reproduce the same thing and write here and there. Simple example, let us say I ask a question on state. 9 out of 10 people, introduction will be what? Study of political science begins and ends with the state, Garner. Why? Because that is the only quote they would have read. And then you don't go expect in an examination hall for them to reward you saying that I need 300, sir. From where you will get 300 if you are not put any effort in regarding producing certain uniqueness in your answer. Understood? This is a competitive exam. Everybody won't get marks for writing everybody's same thing. You will have to bring certain level of uniqueness. And that is possible here. Uniqueness does not mean I'm telling you have to read 100 content. Just remodify it. Give new examples. Give new perspectives. Perspectives are important. Not scholars, perspectives. You can look at an issue from multiple perspectives. Understood? So that is also one more tool what we have to develop, bringing different perspectives in our analysis. Now more importantly, apart from all this, is how do we address the question? Okay, so in a good answer should have the following qualities. The reason is that you can't exactly predict the best answer, but you can tell what are the common features of a good answer. One is what? You should have addressed the demand of the question. So what I mean by demand of the question, when I am asking a question, comment on significance of behavioralism. I don't want you to write all the story about behavioralism. I want you to stress more on significance. Significance means what? Importance. So in your points it should be connected to what? Importance of behavioralism. Second one, structure. What do you mean by structure? The way you have organized your points, that should be systematically represented. There should be a flow in your answer. When somebody reads your answer, they have to be able to easily understand. And third, I will also like to see certain key terms, keywords in your answer. So for example, let us say you're writing on Gramsci, I need to see about hegemony, organic intellectuals, structure of legitimization, structure of coercion, organic ideology, war of maneuver, war of position. Understand? Fourth, you can also bring certain examples. Again, as I said, examples depending upon the question where you feel that you can give. So don't forcefully try to give an example. Don't forcefully yourself saying that. Some people have this bad habit of saying that they'll ask a question on John Locke. They'll end their answer saying that Indian Constitution is a. Why are you writing about Indian Constitution? They're asking about Indian Constitution. They're asking about Locke's idea. So why will you forcefully in every question try to bring an Indian constitutional angle? Why? Because sir, I want to bring multiple perspectives. Don't try to bring many perspectives. Try to bring those perspectives what they're asking. Don't try to forcefully try to bring a perspective which is not there. Got it? So these are the basic things you'll have to require to write a good answer. Understood? So this is what you'll have to practice over the coming days to ensure that how we can write effectively. Now here in the course what we'll be doing, first I'll be taking topics. Okay, I'll be starting with Western political thought. Very simple, I'll take the topic. I'm not going to explain in detail. I'm just going to highlight what are the key ideas. Okay, and how I would have organized my points. So for example, if I'm taking a thinker, I'll look into key ideas what he has presented and I'll write about the key commentators which are there. Commentators ka matlab, those who have praised. See, there can be two ways. Some commentators would have praised somebody. For example, Rousseau says that Plato's Republic is the best treatise that is ever written on education. Or there may be another commentator who is criticizing him. So for example, Karl Popper in his book Open Society and Its Enemies calls Plato as what? Enemy of open society. So I need to have 3-4 commenters, like one who have praised, one who have criticized it. And I need to know key dialogues, especially in Western political thought. Key dialogue, Plato, 4-5 dialogues. Unless philosopher becomes kings learn the art of philosophy, the world will not rest from its evils. No law or ordinance is mightier than the knowledge of philosopher king. The reality is the shadow of ideas. You understand? At least 3-4 dialogues I have to know what Plato has told about. Alright, which I can use in the exam, which I can quote in my answers. That's why I told you should have practiced it. You should have known it. So we are going to go through like that. I'm going to explain an idea, not in detail, just tell who has told what. Then we'll go into previous year questions, that how do we tackle these questions, how do we approach these questions. Then we'll go into probable questions. Probable means which has been not asked, but which might be asked. Alright. And here and there I'll give you also certain value addition. So there will be more value addition for what? IR. Because IR is bit more contemporary, but for Western political thought, Indian little value addition. And I'll be also later posting in the group what you can say, the book reviews. Means I have done a collection of book reviews written by different scholars. So there you can make value addition from it. Value addition means bring certain perspective. Let us take for example Thomas Piketty. Thomas Piketty is a critic of whom? Capitalism. He's also written a book called as what? Capital in 21st century. So basically what is summary of Piketty's ideas in this book, or which I can use it in my answer. So Thomas Piketty speaks about how inequality had reduced after Second World War till 1970s or 1980s. The reason what he articulates there, because there was emergence of welfare state model. Then you can say after 1980s what happened? Thatcherism, Reaganism came about, and you can say rise of neoliberal state. And this is a time period where he says again inequality has started to increase, and that he has documented through what? Giving empirical evidence that how rich are becoming richer, poor are becoming poorer. And the other key argument what he makes is that he says that we need to reduce the inequality, and he gives reasons for it. Why we need to reduce inequality? Because he connects same Aristotelian idea that inequality is linked to what? Political instabilities, revolution, growing frictions. And that is why he says that there is a moral obligation for us to reduce what? Inequalities. And for that he recommends what kind of state is required? A welfare model of state. This is one idea. I prefer to use it where I want it based on the demand of the question. Get in mind. So that is what we call as value addition. You understand? So when I would have analyzed certain theories, also know, for example, in present context, we see rise of what? In Western societies, what is happening? The rise of neo-right governments. So here again, when I would have read, I would have already prepared on a theory called as Sheldon Wolin's what we call as inverted totalitarianism. Inverted totalitarianism, or what we can say, democracy incorporated. It is nothing similar to Farid Zakaria's idea of illiberal democracies. Means elections are happening, voting is taking place, but the liberal values in these societies are completely declining. So you can refer to government by Trump, or in Hungary what you had earlier Viktor Orban's government, or in Italy what you have Meloni's government in that regard. So that is what we call as inverted totalitarian. These kind of theoretical linkages we'll be doing when we look into certain topics. You understand? So in crash course you can't expect for us to teach political science. That is not going to be done. It's more about a quick revision and way of approaching it. And every day you'll have to write 5 questions. At the end of the course, on what topic I have done, I'll be giving you 5 questions with time limit. You'll have to write. And please understand, there's no alternative to writing. Sir, I will read more. No matter how much ever you read, if you don't have the capacity to write in an examination hall, it comes down to nothing. Understood? And you have to learn to write under pressure. If I give you 1 hour time and tell write one answer, any person will write the best answer. AI can only help your preparation. AI cannot replace your brain. So you should also have your own brain, and you have to know how to use the content. Understand? There is no point in content accumulation. Some people have the habit of they're not becoming district collectors, they're becoming content collectors. They just keep on collecting content, make it a dump yard. If you see their answers, it is absolutely useless. Why? Because it's not about having content, it's about knowing how to use that content in which part of the exam. Correct? In simple. So every day we'll be writing what? 5 questions on the topics. So my target is to complete the entire PSIR within 20 days. Okay, so allocated 5 days for each section, part A, part B, paper 2 part A, paper 2 part B. And in this 20 classes, what we'll be doing? Trying to write most of the previous year question, probable question, and for IR, certain current affairs update. Here we'll be moving more towards what? Question and answer format. Instead of reading the theoretical component, just what is required for my answer. Got it? Now let's start with today's session, that is on Western political thought. That is one basic aspect what you have to do. So in this session we'll take about 3 scholars at a time we'll do. That is Plato, Aristotle and Machiavelli. So let's quickly come to Plato and tell me what are the key ideas of Plato. So if you are making a 1-pager notes, what should be there in your notes? You are making a 1-pager notes, what should be there in your notes regarding Plato? Very short notes, simple. What you're see, why I'm telling short notes is that end of the day, what you read, keywords, only that you are going to write in an answer. Don't think about you are going to mug up the entire content what is given in a notes. That cannot be done. That is saying, let us say you are reading 80 pages for Plato. I'm not telling it's useless. First time you read, it's needed for a conceptual understanding. But let us think you are revising 80 pages, no use. You have to just summarize. So in what ways we can summarize? A quick way of doing it. What are the important ideas given by Plato? One is theory of forms. Okay, this can be also called as theory of ideas. It is one and the same. Then one important idea is that regarding his education. The other key important idea he speaks about theory of souls. The other important key idea what he speaks about is the idea of communism of wives and property. And what is the other key idea? The idea of philosopher king. Then you have the idea of justice. And you also have to know Plato's views on laws. Understand? So based on the previous year questions, if you go through and what questions they have asked in the exam, largely what you can find, these are the questions that have, or these are the themes on which questions have come in the exam when you take Plato. Now the questions will come in what format? It can be in form of quotes. You understand? For every one of this theory there can be a quote. So what some people will feel is that the moment they see a new quote, they get tensed, saying that what? Okay, this quote is not in there in my notes. Don't worry about it. Just understand the quote and link that quote. It is linked to which theme. For example, let us take reality is the shadow of ideas. Plato. They're asking you to comment. Okay, let us say this is for 10 marks. One more question. Discuss Plato's theory of forms. 10 marks, 150 words. What is the difference in these two questions? One and the same. You understand? So if you have really understood Socrates and Plato, you really understand UPSC. What did Plato say? Matter is not permanent. The idea behind the matter, that is more of permanence. So matters can keep changing its shape, matters can keep changing its form, but the ultimate idea, that remains constant. So for example, the idea of beauty, the idea of what you can say good life, So in UPSC also what they do is that they keep changing the form of the question, but the ultimate idea behind the question remains constant. So here also the idea behind this question is what? Same thing, they're asking you about his views on what? Ideas. That is nothing but theory of forms. Here also the question is on what? Same thing, theory of forms. Instead of asking theory of forms, they asked what? Reality is the shadow of ideas. You understand? So here one thing you need to understand in the exam, don't get panicked just because you saw a question in a new way or a new form. You need to use your brains. You need to think about, okay, ultimately this is connected to which theory I have read. This is connected to theory of forms. Now what is theory of forms? In a very simple summarized way, what you can write in an answer format. Okay, let us take up this question. Reality is the shadow of ideas. Comment. So tell me, how will you start your answer? What will be your introduction? And please remember, this is a 10 marker question. You have to write within 150 words. So what will be your introduction? Any one of you? What is the introduction you want to write? In exam, you won't get so much time to think. Quickly on the spot you have to tell. What will you write? Simple, write a dialogue. It is said, Plato is philosophy. Plato is philosophy. Philosophy is Plato. Then you can write, Plato is the father of political philosophy. He's in his most celebrated work, Republic. His more celebrated work, Republic. Plato says that, or Plato has been influenced from Socrates, who believed that there are two worlds. Which are the two worlds? The world of matter and the world of ideas. And for Plato, what does he argue? That in his idea, means I'll mention about allegory of caves, but I'm not going to explain what is allegory of caves. You don't have so much words and all to write. You have to write within 150 words. So just mention the keyword is that Plato explains in his allegory of caves that whatever you see in the material world, which you assume to be the reality, is not the reality. It is form of certain idea. For him, ideas are permanent. Matter is not permanent. Why it is not permanent? Because it can be destroyed. It can change its particular form. Hence, for him, what is true knowledge? The ability to understand what? The ultimate reality. And the ultimate reality belongs to the other world. Which other world? The world of ideas. Hence, that is why he says that reality is what? Shadow of ideas. But since the question is comment ka matlab, I am not just explaining what is Plato's reality of ideas, I need to bring my opinion on it also. So I will have to write at least one short paragraph bringing the critical evaluation of it. So what is the critical evaluation of it? Now what you told was the thesis. Now what is the antithesis to it? Simple, you bring a Marxist perspective in your answer, where Karl Marx argued that material condition or matter determines the ideas, it is not the other way around. Or you can also bring an Aristotelian critique here, where Aristotle had argued that you cannot completely separate the two worlds, that is the world of matter and world of ideas. He told a form should be form of something what you see in the material world. But never, and thirdly, you can say the theory has been also criticized for saying it is highly metaphysical. It lacks any kind of empirical evidence to it. But nevertheless, you can say this is one of the most influential idea which Plato and Socrates have contributed, and this idea also shaped the development of what? Western political thought. This is what I would have written in my answer. You understand? So what this requires? It requires two things. One, your ability to summarize your answer within the given time window. See why I'm telling, because we are not dealing with foundational course. It's a crash course, meaning you are going to write the mains exam in span of 2 months. Understand? You don't have the time or leisure to say that I'll take half an hour to write an answer. You have to write it within 7 minutes. So what will come handy to you? Keywords, key ideas, what you have understood, and your criticism should be ready. Means the moment theory of form comes or this idea comes, you have to know Aristotle critical at Marxist perspective. I'll bring in my answer, then I'm going to conclude it. That's why I told introduction, you can't sit and think hell lot of time, what will I write? Your introduction should be ready. Have 3-4 things that is already ready. Plato is philosophy, philosophy is Plato. Conclusion, what you can use in most of the question, the entire Western political thought is nothing but footnotes of Plato and Aristotle. That you keep changing it based on the need or demand of the question. Now same way, let us think they ask the same question, discuss Plato's theory of forms. What will you write again? More or so, same thing. You understood? So question is not very different. So that's why I told, just understand the key ideas of Plato. One is what? Theory of forms. One is what? Education, soul, communism of wives and property, justice, philosopher, king, and laws. Got it? So question can come 2 ways. One is what? It can come in form of a quote, or it can be a direct question they have asked. So just try to think about which theory we are linking it. Now same way, let us think you are reading about his education. So let us think this question is there. I need you to answer this question. Let us think question will come. This is not a PYQ. This is what I am telling, a probable question. Take down the question. Plato's Republic is the best treatise ever written on education. Who told this? Rousseau. Comment. And I think they asked for 15 marks. Now I want you to give me the answer. What will you write for this particular question? You have to tell me what will you write. Understand? Now your mind should not work in such a way that, sir, हमारा notes में ये नहीं दिया है, सिर्फ मेरा quote है, मैं क्या लिखूं? You have to write something. Now learn the art of how to address questions. 1. Who is making this statement? Rousseau. He is making a statement. He is making a statement on whom? Plato's work. Which work? Republic. And what is Rousseau telling? What is he telling? It's the best treatise. What do you mean by that? It's the best book that is ever written on what? Education. Now, in your thesis means first explain, write about why Rousseau is praising Plato. Understand? For this you cannot tell, sir, points किधर है, किधर नहीं है, दिमाग में है, दिमाग डालो, लिखो. Why he is praising Plato's Republic on education? Tell me the points. You have to give me points. If you open your book also, it will be not there. It's only the Rousseau is there. You have to tell me points. What will you write? Because they're asking your opinion. They're telling comment on it. If you're not getting a point is that I'll give you the structure of the answer, how I would have written. First, I would have written the positive aspects of Plato's education. And I'll write about why Rousseau is praising Plato. The reason is because back in those days itself, he recommended for state-controlled education. He made sure that education was accessible for all. He did not exclude anybody out of it initially. Secondly, you can say that his education is exhaustive, means he has gone into minute details about writing that what kind of education should be given at which age. For example, he says 0 to 6 children should be taught what? Music, gymnasium, moral stories, because it will bring strong moral character in them. You understand? So such detailed work has nowhere in human history has been written, and Plato had written at that point of time. Secondly, one more positive aspect of his education was that he also allowed women to be educated. This was ages before, you can say, even feminism had emerged. That is why some also consider Plato as what? Forerunner of feminism, or the first feminist. Third, you can say that what kind of education is speaking about. He is not speaking about an education system where the end purpose is just for creating smart individuals, but a rational, reasonable individual that will lead the state towards what? Excellence. Hence you can say that his education has been praised, that what? It is one of the best education that has been ever written, where he had combined the sophist education traditions with the Athenian education system. But second part of my answer, because it's comment now, so I might also find that it is not the best. It not be so relevant in today's time, and I'll bring the critic. One, I'll bring Aristotelian critic. What is a critic? What education he's speaking about? It is impractical, because he's speaking about 50 years of education. Second point, what he told, his education system is not based on inclusion, it is based on exclusion. Why? Because he has excluded the producer class from getting education. Third, who is that? Karl Popper had called him the enemy of open society. Why he had called the enemy of open society? Because the purpose of bringing a state-controlled education, because he says that education can prevent the young minds from being corrupted. Corrupted means what? You should not go against the state. Understand? The end purpose of Plato is what? Use education as a tool to create whom? Subservient individuals to the will of the state. But in spite of these limitations, one cannot deny that Plato's work Republic even today can be referred as what? An important source for what? Building a education system for a moral society. So the entire answer what I wrote, it is nothing based on what is in any of the notes. It's purely my articulation. Understand? This is one thing you need to understand. This is how your exams will be. Bearing in mind, UPSC is doing it more and more. They are not going to give you freebies. Questions saying that how it was there when we were writing in 2016, 2017, right? How questions used to come. Comment on Plato's theory of justice. Straight away, by hearted in your notes, go cut paste it. Don't expect any more questions like that to come in UPSC. I'm not saying it will not come only. If it come, fine, you're sorted to write. But if it does not come also, you have to be equipped to write. Because when you're writing, you don't feel that sense of confidence. Why? Because this is something new you're writing. It is not there in your notes. You are just articulating your view. You understand? So in 2017 when I had written, they had asked this question called as Aristotle's theory of revolution. Something like inequality everywhere is the cause of revolution. I had never read it. You understand? At that point of time, it was not there in my notes. I only knew something general cause, particular cause. But entire answer I built on my own common sense what I had. He had told what? Inequality is a revolution everywhere. So I took examples. I told, take in French Revolution, take the American Revolution, take present times, the Arab Spring. Everywhere the reason was that form of inequality, whether it's social inequality, whether it is political inequality, whether it is economic inequality. I wrote all that and then told what recommendation Aristotle says. Reduce inequality, ensure that all the sections are represented in the government. And that I told, this is a masterpiece that is written to how to run statecraft even in modern day times. And that is why Aristotle is called as the father of political science. And that year I had got paper 154. They will not reward people who are just bookworms, who just try to come and vomit what is there in the book. Right? You have to apply your common sense. And that's what I told. When this question comes, you can't go search in a book. Book only says this much, right? Quote is there. Rousseau has placed Plato's Republic. But this is coming as a question. They're asking you to comment on it. So comment ka matlab means what? You have to tell why it is considered as the best treatise. What is the reason? What makes you think that it is so much good about education? Then you need to write about limitations of his theory of education. Right? And that's why I told here, you don't need to read very systematically 0 to 6, 6 to 18, 18 to 20, 20 to 50, that all that story is only for your preparation. But when you write an answer, you can't write so detailed and all. You have to be more brief in what you say. Got it? So same way there is one more question which is a previous year question, and let us see how do you address this question. So take down the question as Plato's communism is a supplementary machinery. Plato's communism is a supplementary machinery to give effect and to reinforce that spirit which is education is to create. Nettleship. Comment. And this has been asked for 20 marks. In 2006 this question has come. So I'll give you 3 minutes time to think and tell me what is the demand of the question and what will be the structure of your answer. You have to quickly think. Within 3 minutes you have to tell me what is the demand of the question and how will you structure your answer. Because here structuring is very important. That is the first thing of writing a good answer. The moment it's like playing the game of chess. In chess you will win the match if you take the initial positions which are very strong. The same here, the moment you see a question, quickly you are able to make a structure in your mind that will determine whether the answer is good or not. So some people what they think is that by just writing answers, their answers will improve. Test series, I'll write test series, my answer. No, test series is only meant to what? You are testing your knowledge what you have gained. But unless you don't know how to structure it, you don't know, then by writing tests alone, your scores won't improve. Your thinking should be very smart. So tell me what is the exact demand of the question. Simplify it and tell me what exactly the question requires. What is Nettleship saying? Take your chance, there is no harm. See, discussion, deliberation is a key aspect in political science. That is what you have read about J.S. Mill, etc. Same thing should be applied in a class. It's not with that I'll dictate and you go and write. Very good. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. The answer should be structured in such a way that first you have to write about his education, not about his communism. First you need to write about what is the effect and spirit that is education, means what was the purpose he brought education system. What was the purpose? To create an ideal state, and that ideal state was based on what? Governed by knowledge. He says, now unless philosopher becomes kings or kings learn the art of philosophy, the world will not rest from its evils. So that was the purpose, that was the reinforcement. Understood? That is why he brought education. But as he told, Plato was conscious of the fact that even though the ruler is knowledgeable, but yet that ruler might have weaknesses. What is that weakness? Family and private ownership of property. Why? Because when he presents his theory of soul, where he says that in every human soul there are 3 elements: reason, courage and appetite. So even in the most knowledgeable person there is room for appetite, and in order to ensure that, he'll supplement it by bringing what? Communism of wives and property. Means those who are going to be part of the state, that is the ruling class and the soldier class, they cannot marry, they cannot have private property, and that is why it acts as a balancing act for his theory of education. That is what Nettleship is trying to say. That is what you need to explain in your answer. But then you can also write in your answer, what are the limitations of this idea? What is the limitation? Simple, write the same thing. Aristotle says, that is what? Plato's ideas are not practical in that regard. Private property and family are time-tested institutions. He's looking at family very narrowly. He's looking at family only as a process of reproduction, but family also plays an important role in political socialization and developing moral values in individuals. And you can say private property is also very important for what? It's an incentive for hard-working individuals. It will lead to what? Excellence of the state. Then you can also say that one more critic, what Popper says, that he is enemy of open society. Why? Because he is interfering in personal relations of individuals in that regard. And feminists have criticized him. Why feminists have criticized him? Because they say that he's denied women the privilege or their individual liberty of enjoying motherhood in that regard. He's using them as laboratory animals for his experiments. Understood? But nevertheless, you can say that even though many of Plato's ideas might not be implementable in his times, neither the present times, but the essence of his ideas continues to be a guiding light, that what? Rulers should have knowledge. Understood? So 70-80% of the answer what I write, it's my own words. 20-30% what I take from notes, keywords, key points. So if you are right, if you are explaining here communism of wives and property, no use. You understand? Some people, how they'll write? First they'll write theory of education, then they'll write communism of wives and property. You will not get marks unless you establish the link. And what is the link here? You have to tell why it is supplementary. First you will have to write about what is the effect and reinforcement is education will create. That should be there in your answer. Second, you have to write about why it acts as a supplementary machinery. Third part, what you will write about? Criticism of that particular idea. Then you are going to conclude your answer. You are getting a point. So that's why I told. Why many people don't get marks is that their inability to understand the demand of the question. This should be practiced. It won't come without practice. Unless you write a lot of answers, you practice a lot of answers, it won't come. So many people only look at the keywords and they'll write off. What is that? Communism of wives and property. No, you understand what context Nettleship is making that particular statement. Understood? So you understood here what is the demand. You need to write about first his education. You have to write about what is the impact that rulers should be knowledgeable. Then you have to write about why does he supplement with communism of wives and property, because he is aware of the fact that even the most knowledgeable person can have weaknesses. That is what? Family and private property. To address that problem, he brings what? Communism of wives and property. Got it? Understood how to approach the question. Now, same way, remaining with the same area, that is what is communism of wives and property. So let us think they ask this question. This is again connected to the same idea. Until philosophers are kings, until philosophers are kings, or kings and princes of this world have the spirit and power of philosophy, cities will never rest from evil. Plato. Discuss 20 marks. Now tell me, how will you approach this question? Okay, if you look at this statement, you can relate this to what? Which theory of Plato? Theory of philosopher king. Now when you want to build your answer, how will you build your answer? On what basis you will construct your answer? Give me an introduction. Any one of you tell me what is the introduction you are going to write. Right, okay, he's telling he's going to give the context of the conditions in Athens at that point of time. So that will be the most ideal thing to write. So you can say, you can write that Plato in his most celebrated work Republic spoke about the ideas of philosopher king to address the ongoing crisis in Athens city state. Now what was the crisis there? In the sense? Hmm. Hmm. That also you can do, but you can't repeat the same thing what is here. Okay, one either you can introduce about Plato. But see, for every question don't use the same format. No, because why I'm telling, when you start with the context, means have multiple way of writing. So when you're writing a paper, it should not be that every answer has the same approach. There might be question on Machiavelli, there'll be question on Plato. Don't start with the same thing. Plato in his book Republic, Machiavelli, use different approach. Here you write about the context. Context in that, what context he gave this idea. Second, you can write something on brief background, saying that Plato was a patriot, worried about the ongoing conditions in Athens and what had happened in Athens. Corruption, nepotism, death of Socrates had deep impact on Plato's mind. And for him, what was the problem? What was the root cause of all the problem? The ignorant rulers, rulers who did not have knowledge. And for him, what was true knowledge? One who can understand the world of ideas. And hence he wanted philosophers to become kings. So what is the advantage of philosopher becoming kings? Since a philosopher has that kind of knowledge, he'll not run behind material things. That is what? Power, money, etc. His ordinance is driven by what? Reason. And otherwise he says that what? Kings will have to learn philosophy. Why? Because when kings learn philosophy, that will help them to govern well. And there you can say that he was influenced by Socrates, and Socrates believed that what? A ship should be always driven by an expert sailor. Hence, state should be also run by a person who has immense knowledge in philosophy, because philosophy helps him to understand what is the purpose of good life. Understood? Then you can say that what he did to supplement that, you can add that previous statement what Nettleship told. What is the Nettleship? He brought communism of wives and property to act as a supplementary machinery to reinforce the spirit and effect that his education system was to create. But then you can bring critical evaluation of it. Critical means you can bring criticism. Now what is the criticism you'll bring here? Yeah, tell me what exactly you'll write. So before going into Aristotle, write about Immanuel Kant. Okay, what Immanuel Kant he said was that, he said it is neither desirable for desirable to philosophers to become rulers, neither it is practical for king to learn philosophy. That cannot happen. And Immanuel Kant said, no matter how much knowledge you have, power debases any kind of reason. Ultimately what? Debases them any kind of rationality. In short term you can say, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts a person absolutely. Second thing what you can say that, what Aristotle told, end of the day, rule of law is better than rule and wisdom of one particular individual. Then you can write your own points. You can say human history has shown us that when too much power is given in the hands of one individual, ultimately it has debased them of rationality, and it led to what? Emergence of totalitarian governments, as we see in the times of Hitler, Mussolini, etc. So hence you can say Plato's what you can say analysis and Plato's what do you call is that diagnosis was correct, but his prescription was far worse than the disease. You're getting the point. So in this answer, that's what I'm telling. In philosophy based questions, you can't just write what is there in the notes. You have to bring a lot of explanation in your answer. Means you have to write in your answer, why does he say philosophers should become kings? You need to give explanation for it. Or the other option, what he says, kings should learn philosophy. That also have to write. What will happen when kings learn philosophy? And ultimately you will connect to the point what? It leads to good governance. It gives them the capacity to know what is the idea of a good life. They will not run behind power. They will not run behind money. And that is why he brings the idea of philosopher king, where he says no law or ordinance is mightier than the knowledge of philosopher king. Then you will go into what? Critical evaluation of it. So there you are going to speak about whom? Immanuel Kant. What does Immanuel Kant say? No matter how knowledgeable a person is, ultimately power debases any form of rationality. In other short form you can say power corrupts, absolute power corrupts a person absolutely. Then you can write about Aristotle, who speaks about importance and significance of rule of law. So he says that we can't take the risk of putting an individual above the rule of law. Everybody should be bound by the law. And then you are going to write your own angle saying that what? That is what we have seen in human history, that whenever power has been concentrated in hands of one individual, that ultimately has led to what? Authoritarianism or a totalitarian government. So hence you can say that we can agree with what Plato said. His diagnosis of Athens was correct, but his prescription was far worse than the disease. You understand? So that is what I mean by an organic answer. Organic answer, the evaluator will come to know, okay, this is a person who has understood the concept. Others will do only cut paste. What is cut paste? Add 3-4 statements here, add 3-4 statements there, and end their answer. Correct point. So that is why you can say why people don't get marks. Their scores become stagnant. The reason is that there is no organic way of writing style in their answer writing. It is more mechanical. What is mechanical? Just here and there cut paste notes. And that is also laughable when you look at students. Many students will come and tell, I am updating my notes. How much you'll update for Western political thought and all? There is nothing called as an update. Just write. You have to know how to write it. What you can update is this critical evaluation, but Immanuel Kant, Aristotle. Understood? And for every answer, my own idea should be also there. Me saying that, what lesson I learned from this? Yeah, we can't give absolute power to any one person, no matter how knowledgeable is he. Got it? Understood? Got the point? How to write an organic answer. Keywords, yes, I'll use from the notes. Dialogues, I'll use from the notes. Got it? So what you understood, right? Now you wrote 3-4 questions. Even though they belong to same theme, but you can't write them the same way. It depends upon the question. And that is what we say, that you need to have that experience of writing a lot of answers. Understood? The questions on Plato, when you look at, when we answered question on Plato's, what is that, education, Plato's, what is that, philosopher king, communism of wives and property, theory of forms. Okay, now let us take about his views on justice. Same, we are approaching form of a question. So take down the question as simple question, a straightforward question. Comment on Plato's idea of justice. Comment on Plato's idea of justice. 10 marks, 150 words. 10 marks, 150 words. And I hope most of you have read, most of you have finished the syllabus, right? Is there anybody very new to political science? You are very new. Then it will be difficult for you guys, okay? Yeah, trying to understand, it's fine. So I'll give you now 7 minutes. 7 minutes timer will on. You have to write an answer immediately. So I'll start the timer now. Take the question and try to write whatever. So you can tell, sir, I have not revised. UPSC will not ask those reasons. On the exam day, you will have to write. So try to write with whatever knowledge you have. Try to write it, then I'll help you out what you could have written. Your time starts now. I'll switch on the timer. You will get 7 minutes to write. Okay, so you're starting now within 7 minutes, and I need you to complete the answer. And please remember, the question is comment on Plato's idea of justice. The question is not what is Plato's idea of justice. Your last 4 minutes. Last 3 minutes. Last 2 minutes. Last 60 seconds. Last 30 seconds. Last 15 seconds. And your time is up. So how many of you are able to complete the answer? Okay, how many of you are not able to write only? See, now why we make you write within given time limit? This is what you need to experience in an exam hall. You are going to do everything under what? Pressure. So unless if you can't think under pressure, you can't write under pressure, you are never used to it. What will happen is that there will be candidates who have not studied at all. It doesn't make a difference because end of the day they are not going to clear. There are candidates who have studied but they don't know how to handle pressure, meaning that what? Their mind won't work when you pressurize and you make them write. There are candidates who have worked under pressure, means what? Keeping a time factor writing. Why? Because that will make you think very quickly. So obviously here you should have written in 7 minutes, but how should have been the approach? The key word here is what? Comment. Comment ka matlab, they're not asking what is Plato's idea of justice, have to comment on Plato's idea of justice. For example, it's like you watched a movie, somebody is asking you comment on the movie, you're not just going to explain the story of the movie, you're also going to tell what you liked in the movie, what you didn't like in the movie, what could have been done. Same way when you're writing on Plato's idea of justice, first and foremost, you have to write about his idea, what is his idea of justice, then you need to bring a critical evaluation of it. So here what will be your introduction? You can start with what can you start? Plato's book Republic has a subtitle carrying what? Justice. That is the significance what he gives to the idea of justice in his scheme of things. Then you go on to say that what does he say about justice? What is his idea of justice? What is Plato's idea of justice? One, he says that state is individual, writ large. Okay, I don't need to explain this. Why? Because it's a 10 marker question. Second, what he says that according to him justice is what? Functional specialization, meaning what? Every individual performing their duty allocated by the state. Third key aspect of his justice is what? What he believes is justice. justice is not rights oriented according to Plato. In Plato's scheme it is more duty oriented. And what is the other aspect of Plato's idea of justice? For him, justice does not involve harm principle. Justice involves doing good for all. Because if you remember his dialectics, he say justice is not in the interest of the strong, justice is not in the interest of the weak, justice is not harming anybody, justice is a essentially good principle. And what more importantly Plato says, justice is one of the most important virtue of any society. Then you can say what Plato also says regarding justice is that justice is not a contract, justice is naturally endowed in human mind. Now what is the critical analysis, what I'll write about this? What I can write, what I can comment about it? So I can say that Plato represents a traditional understanding of justice which does not involve affirmative action, or what you can say the principle of equity. Secondly, you can say Plato's idea of justice does not involve rights, it only speaks about duties, and Plato fails to differentiate between justice at individual level and justice at the level of the state, because he assumes both are same. And hence you can say Plato's idea of justice is incompatible with the modern day idea of social justice, in terms of what John Rawls says, that any idea of justice should be always protecting the vulnerable, weaker sections of the society. This is what I would have written in my answer. And for you to be able to write this within 7 minutes, you should have already done brainstorming while preparing itself. You know, to write effectively, you should have done this at your preparation stage itself. So that is why if you see most of the questions in exam paper, you will find comment, critically examine, critically analyze, explicit, elaborate. Understand? Why many people will not score marks is that they are just writing what is there in the book. They are just writing what is Plato's idea of justice, but they are not bringing what? Critical evaluation of it. For that you will have to bring your ideas on it. So I would write 2/3 of my answer about what is Plato's idea of justice. 1/3 of my answer will include what? My thoughts on it. Got it? So if it's a 20 marker question, I can elaborate a bit and go on. If it's a 10 marker question here, I would have written this question in points format. When I write about Plato's features of justice, I'll write in point formats. When I did the critical evaluation, that I'll write in paragraph format. There is no thumb rule that everything should be written in a paragraph format. Get a point? Is there anywhere UPSC has told a rule saying that you should not use points in political science paper? They have not given any direction. I have written in points format when I wrote. I got 280, 290. And not all questions, some questions. Like whenever it involves features of behavioralism, I have written in points format. Got it? When it's too philosophical question, I have used paragraph format. Understood? Comment on Plato's idea of justice. Understood? How you could have approached it. Now all these questions what you solve, these were all questions oriented this way. One type of question was that it was a quote based question on Plato. Quote means there is a quote. Who is telling that quote? Either Plato is telling it, or either some other person is saying it. Now the one more set of questions that will come in the exam is comparing Plato to modern ideas. That is one more trend of question they'll ask. For example, take down this question. Plato as the first feminist. Comment. 10 marks, 150 words. Plato as the first feminist. So how do you approach this question? First of all, you should know what does feminism mean. What is feminism? It's an idea that believes that men and women are equal. And now they are saying, they want you to comment whether you think Plato is the first feminist or not. So obviously, how do you structure your answer? Tell me what is the introduction you will write. What is the introduction you are going to write here? Tell me something creatively. Something. Don't tell me the standard introduction. Plato in his book Republic. You'll write what is feminism. Feminism is an idea that speaks about gender equality. Now, one you can write like that, how Greek society treated women, or you can say Plato's view on women has been a matter of debate since the ancient times till today. The question mark remains whether he is a feminist or not. So now I am going to explore in my answer, the first part of my answer, I am going to write what makes him or why people consider him to be the first feminist. So what are the arguments? What are the arguments that says that Plato is the first feminist? Simple. Plato's idea of philosopher king did not exclude women from occupying the position. Second, Plato's education provided equal educational opportunities to both men and women. Third, what you can say, Plato, by bringing communism of wives and property, he relieved women from domestic duties and enabled them to contribute more toward public affairs. Okay, this will categorize what? Okay, Plato was way ahead of his times. But however, on the other hand, Plato has been also criticized by modern day feminists. So for example, I would write here, Susan Molar Okin calls Plato as a reluctant feminist. In her book, what she's written, Women in Western Political Thought. Okay, she calls him as what? Reluctant feminist. Because for Plato, state was the end. State was the end. Women were the means. Okay. That is what I would have written. Second argument I would have written is that the idea that first feminist, there is a Greek scholar called as Euripides, who even before Plato had spoken about giving equal political opportunities for women. So some say that he is not the first feminist. There has been scholars even before Plato. Third argument what you can bring is that Plato in his book Republic has not included a single female character. Take Cephalus, Polemarchus, etc. all are men. And Plato also in his another work called as Iamosis, where he says that those women, so those men who are wicked, they'll be reborn as women. So this statement from Plato, many question his credential to be a feminist. And then you can write in your conclusion that in spite of this criticism limitation, one cannot deny that Plato's ideas regarding political empowerment of women was way ahead of his times. That is what you can write as your answer. You understood? Same question, how you can make it bit different, how you can make it more impactful. And that's why I told you have to find a way of writing which is bit more different from others. It can't be same points what everybody writes. You will have to do a bit of research. You will have to do a bit of value addition. You will have to build an approach. That's why I told you, introduction, don't use same introduction. Plato, no. Father of political philosophy, no. Try to think for this question what you could have written as introduction. Plato's views of women on women has been a matter of debate from the past to the present, whether he is a feminist or not. Then you introduce by saying that what are the arguments in favor of feminism and what are the counter arguments that why is not a feminist. Then you conclude your answer. Got it? So these kind of questions are appearing in exam, like Machiavelli, forerunner of behaviorism, Plato as the first feminist. Same way, the question will also come, Plato as the first fascist. Plato as the first fascist. Comment. Let us take 10 marks, 150 words. So what will be your approach here? How will you approach this question? Obviously, when you are telling is the first fascist, you have to know something about fascism. It's a modern day ideology. It speaks about what? A totalitarian government. Okay, now they're asking whether Plato is the first fascist. Comment means you have to write your views. What will you write? How will you approach? Yeah, of course. Here, ultimately, the arguments which supports the uh, hypothesis which is given, and counter arguments which goes against the idea. But how will you start your answer? Yes, yes. You can start with Karl Popper. You can say Karl Popper in his work, The Open Societies and Enemies, calls Plato as one of the enemy of open societies. Then you can say Plato, the most influential thinker in Western political thought, have been compared to the modern day idea of fascism, because there is some similarities between Plato's ideas and modern day fascism. Now you reiterate, what are the similarities? What is the similarities you see between Plato and fascism? One similarity in both ideas, you can say, both believe that individual is the means and state is the end. Then what you can write, second similarity? What is the second similarity you can find? Obviously, right, he says that absolute power should be given to the philosopher king. In modern day fascism also you have concept called as Ubermark. Ubermark means what? The supreme leader. And you can say absolute, what you can say, obedience to the command of the supreme leader. Third is what? Plato brought state controlled education, means control young minds and to develop more what? Favorable attitudes towards the state. So even if you look at modern day fascism, where you can say they are largely controlled what? Central universities. The phase of free speech, etc., was tightly regulated. And you can also say that they interfered in personal lives of people. So for example, you can say anti-Semitism, which was followed during the Hitler's rule, and here you can say he had prohibited the soldier class and the ruling class from having private property or family. But nevertheless, you can then bring a defense of Plato. You have Levinson, who's written this work called as In Defense of Plato, where Levinson argues that we are comparing the uncomparables. And now you have to tell why we are comparing the uncomparables. One, you can say fascism was an anti-rationality ideology, but Plato's scheme of things was largely based on reasoning, deliberation, dialectics. Secondly, you can say that the end purpose of Plato was to create an ideal state. It did not have any end purpose like the fascists to create what? Ethnic superiority or etc. Thirdly, you can also say that in Plato's scheme of things, he allowed women to be part of the education system rulers, whereas Mussolini had argued that what war is to men, maternity is to women. Hence, you can say that it would be wrong to compare Plato to modern day fascism in that regard. And you can say that Plato continues to be a divided figure in the field of Western political thought, whether he's a fascist or not. Got it? So this you need to write as your answer. But here I explained a lot, but it's a 10 marker question. You won't get so much opportunity to write in detail. You have to write it in a very crisp way. Got it? So these are all applied questions. It can keep coming like that. Plato as the first fascist, Plato as the first feminist, etc. Okay, or they might ask a question saying that, let us take this question. Plato is philosophy. Philosophy is Plato. Comment. What will you write? Plato is philosophy. Philosophy is Plato. Comment. 10 marks. You understand many times what with political science, na? Political science is easy to read, but when it comes to writing, you always feel, you lack content. Why you lack content? Because you need to explain. You have to write in your own words. So what is the essence of the question here? Plain and simple, you cannot separate philosophy from Plato's scheme of things. Plain and simple in your answer, you need to explain his methodology, how his entire ideas are based on philosophy. Philosophy means what? Question about what is life, what is the purpose of a good life. So if you look at most of his ideas of philosopher king, the idea of what is that reality is a shadow of ideas. You can say Plato's approach to understanding politics is what? Philosophical. Hence you can say you cannot separate philosophy out of Plato's scheme of things, and that is why he is rightly considered as what? Father of political philosophy. And now for this question, shall I write criticism? Not required. You understand? So for every question there is no need to write criticism. You have to be able to judge. So for this question I won't write criticism. I'll only explain in my answer what is the link between Plato's ideas and philosophy. Why philosophy is a central part of Plato's understanding of politics. And I'm going to substantiate through his theories. And just I'm going to conclude my answer saying that what? The entire Western political thought is nothing but footnotes of Plato and Aristotle. Got it? Now what is a probable question? Probable question which they have not asked, which they might ask. So let us think, if they ask this question, let us think how will you write? Okay, take down the question as, do you think the idea of philosopher king, is relevant in contemporary world? Examine. (15 marks). How will you write this question? Again, if you open your book and all, you won't find an answer. In your book, what is there? Only what is the idea of philosopher king is there. But your book does not will have the relevance and all. You have to write based on your own thoughts, your own understanding. What will you write? Tell me at least the structure, that how you are going to structure your answer, if not points. Correct. So as you told, first part of your body, since a 15 marker question, you can explain a bit what is the idea of philosopher king? Why did he give the idea of philosopher king? Then very good. Next part of your answer, you have to bring arguments that at least why they feel there is a need for a philosopher king. So what is the need in today's time? Very good. You can write one corruption in, you can give examples. Then very good, in Nepal, countries like, you can say nepotism led to what? Collapse of governments. Then Olaf. So you can say how rulers today are driven by power, not by values in that regard. So I can give the example of criminalization of Indian Parliament. 46% of India's MPs have criminal background. Then, but when you do philosopher king, so you can say democracies everywhere are losing legitimacy, eroding. That is why there might be a feeling that there might be a need of a philosopher king. But then what will you write? See, I am not going to write my answer. This is why we need, this is why we don't. That's not an answer. My opinion, we don't need. But I only wrote in my answer why there is a feeling among people that there is a need for philosopher king. Then I am going to counter that argument saying that same arguments, too much power in hands of any one individual will depace of them rationality. That is what we have learnt in human history in earlier times also. No matter how much person is knowledgeable, ultimately he can be what? What? He is always susceptible to become subserviented to power. So I can give the example of, you can say, the most knowledgeable people are also involved in corruption. So for example, Pakistani nuclear scientist A.Q. Khan, who sold the nuclear templates to North Korea. So hence you can say that the solution for today's problem does not lie in a philosopher becoming a king, as Immanuel Kant said that it is not practical for philosophers to become kings or kings to learn philosophy. For this, to address these problems, we need what? What do we need? What do we need to address the contemporary problems? We need stronger civil societies. We need more rights to be given to the people at large. That will be the solution. The solution is not going to be philosopher king. So here you can add a dialogue towards the end saying that the idea of philosopher king was not relevant to Plato's times, and it does not hold any significance even in present day times. But one cannot deny that the need of knowledgeable rulers. But one cannot agree with Plato that a knowledgeable ruler is above the law. So this entire answer what you will write, half the answer or 1/3 of the answer is basically based on a book that what you have read about philosopher king. 2/3 of the answer is your own analysis that you are going to write in your exam with examples and with arguments substantiating. So please understand here, I am not going to write an answer saying that yes we need one subheading, then again I'll write no we don't need. Means your stand is only not there. You can't write like that. You can write a perspective that there is some people who feel that there is a need of philosopher king. What are their arguments? Then I am going to counter their arguments by saying that what? Why we don't need a philosopher king, or how a philosopher king alone cannot solve today's problems. Got it? That's why I told you, your arguments can vary. So you can say many of today's problems are global issues. It's not like that time period when Plato was there of city states. Today, let us say climate change, migration, etc. To solve these problems, we don't need a philosopher king. We need a collective effort from the global community. Got it? So that's what I told. Political science is a paper. It's like a mini essay. Understood? You can express yourself. You can write. You will get scope for it. But the only problem is that you have to know where to use which argument and how to link it. That is what we say that the organic style of writing an answer. And that is what I have, in my experience, I felt that whenever you write organically, you will get marks. But that should come in the exam hall. For that, you will have to practice. Got it? So that's what I told. Plain and simple. If you take, these are the questions which has come on Plato, completely doable in an exam. But as I told, you need what? Revisions for it. You need to know how to apply for it. And you have to have short notes. So this I'll be uploading in the group. Short notes in the sense just quotes, what you can use as an introduction, what you can use as a conclusion. The last question on Plato will, before we move on to Aristotle, this was the last, I think, previous year question what they had asked. Take down this question. Make a comparative assessment. Make a comparative assessment. Make a comparative assessment. Comparative assessment of Greek perspective of justice. Greek perspective of justice with Rawlsian concept of justice. 20 marks. So what do you observe here with what UPSC is tending to do? What is one observation you can make here? So how they are framing questions now is that you cannot leave out any part of the syllabus. You understand? To write this question, you should have read about Rawls also. You should know about Plato also, or Greeks also. Got it? So that's why I told you, you have to work a lot on PYQs. So I think before 1 year, they've asked about comparison between Rawls' idea of justice and Ambedkar's idea of social justice. You get a point? So these kind of questions will increase. They will also ask tomorrow, make an assessment or comparison between Greek idea of justice and the ancient Hindu political idea of justice. Possibility, you have to be ready to write. Now you cannot tell, sir मेरे नोट्स में किधर दिया है वो नहीं दिया है हमको क्या उल्लू बना दिया. Nobody is making ullu. UPSC is not signing an agreement saying that we are going to ask from these notes. You have to know how to write. You have to on the spot write. So this is a 20 marker question. Okay, so how many minutes you'll get to write? 12 minutes. Not 15, you won't get 15. Okay, because for 20 marker, 15 marker, I don't think so there is any kind of word limit they give. Right? So I think you have written recently, how many pages will be there? 4 sides for 20 marker, for this thing 15 marker, 3 sides. So obviously you have to write within the given time. So you take as 12 minutes. Now write this answer in 12 minutes. Your time starts now. You have to write on the spot. Whatever you can think, you think and you write. Then I'll give you the explanation for it. You get 12 minutes to write the answer. Last 10 minutes. Last 8 minutes. Last 5 minutes. Last 4 minutes. Last 3 minutes. Last 2 minutes. Last 60 seconds. Last 20 seconds. Time up. So if you look at this question, the question was what? Make a comparative assessment. So the keyword is what? Have to make a comparative assessment about what? The Greek perspective of justice. So for here I'll have to know a broad understanding what is the Greek idea of justice. So from where I can understand the Greek idea of justice? Plato, Aristotle, Socrates in that regard. And they're asking for me to make a comparison with what? Rawls' idea of justice. Along with John Rawls, who is given this work called as Theory of Justice. So what will I start my answer? What will be my introduction be here? What can be my introduction that I can write for this question? What I have written? Simple. You can write justice has been an architectonic principle in the field of political science. Simple. This can be your simple introduction. Then what will you write? So first you write a bit about the Greek idea of justice. The Greek idea of justice is represented through ideas of Aristotle, Plato and Socrates, whereas John Rawls provides us the modern day idea of understanding liberal idea of justice. So then you can go on to write there are some similarities in both the Greek idea and Rawlsian idea of justice. What is the some similarities? Both believed that what? Justice is a virtue of a good society. Both Rawls and the Greeks also believed that what that they wanted to build or bring a universal perspective of justice. Both Rawls and Greeks did believe, especially Plato in his book Republic, he says that justice cannot involve harm, cannot involve harm principle. But then you can say, however, both ideas of justice can be also differentiated on many aspects. What are the differences in many aspects between Greeks and Gauls? Greek idea of justice was more based on duties and functional specialization, whereas the Rawlsian idea of justice was largely premised on rights and liberal philosophy. For the Greeks, the idea of justice remained the same at individual level as well as at the level of the state, because Plato says, now what is Plato says? State is individual writ large. But for Rawls, he made a difference between the idea of justice in a society as well as the state. He did not look at them as what? Similar. And for the Greeks, especially Plato, he believed that what? Justice is not a contract. Justice is naturally endowed in human mind. But for Rawls, you can say the principles of justice is socially arrived through what? A social contract. And you can say in Greek idea of justice, they believed inequality is natural. For example, Aristotle says, from hour of birth, some are born to rule, some are born to serve. But for Rawls, you can say that he does not agree that inequality is natural, and he can say any idea of justice or modern day idea of social justice should look to address existing inequalities, and he includes the idea of what? Affirmative action. And you can say that for the Greek idea of justice, it is based on what? Dividing the society into three classes in that regard, whereas for Rawls, he believes that any form of what you can say inequality can be justified only if it is favoring the weaker sections. And in this Greek idea of justice, especially if we take Plato idea of justice in specific, for him you can say that it is based on the identity of which class you belong to. But for Rawls, it is based on veil of ignorance. Nobody should be conscious of their inherent strength and weaknesses. Hence, you can say that the Greek idea of justice was a traditional notion of justice, but Rawls presents the modern day idea of social justice. So, something like that you could have written. Getting a point? So, what they are expecting in exam is there that the student will have to write on the spot. Getting a point? And you will be able to do it if you have done brainstorming. Means there should be sufficient brainstorming, you should have thought about it. For me, it's fine because I'm doing most of post-mortem analysis. You understand? It's not that immediately when I wrote the answer, all the points will come. It's a post, but I would have thought about it. You understand? So it's an indicator. Indicator means questions can come this way also. Now they've asked about comparison between Rawls and Plato. Okay, same way tomorrow they can ask a comparison between what? Compare and contrast the Greek idea of justice with the Hindu political thought. Okay, write down that question. Compare and contrast the Greek idea of justice. Compare and contrast. Compare and contrast the Greek idea of justice. Idea of justice with the ancient Indian political thought. Ancient Indian political thought. So let us think it's a 10-marker question. Now tell me what will be your approach of writing. How do you approach this question? What are the points that you can generate? Tell me an introduction that you are going to write. Okay, that is one way of you can write. So Greek idea of justice can be understood the works of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. Hindu political thought can be understood through reading of Dharma Shastras, Artha Shastra, etc. That is one way of writing. Any other way of writing an introduction? That's good, you can include that. Any other way of writing? One, you can say that the Greek civilization and the ancient Indian civilization represents what you can say epitome of important political ideas or social ideas. Now you will have to go into writing more about how they are similar and how they are different. So what is the similarities? One you can say the Greek idea of justice was based on functional specialization. This is also seen in the Hindu philosophy of Varna Dharma, that is categorizing the society into 4 Varnas. Second one you can say the Greek idea of justice strongly premised itself on what? Doing duties. And same thing if you look at in Hindu political philosophy, it also stresses on dharma, that every person should perform the dharma, that is means it is duty oriented. The Greek idea of justice also premised on the idea that inequality is natural. Like Aristotle told, from hour of birth, some are born to rule, some are born to serve, treating equals equally, unequals unequally. The same idea can be also seen in Hindu political philosophy, when you can say that I think in Manu Smriti, or Manu says that one is born from the head of Brahma, the other is born from the foot of Brahma. So they also justified what? That everybody are not born as equals. And the other idea of justice is that both believed in that what justice, they are looking from the idea of the state, means if every person performs, it results in excellence of the state. But nevertheless there are certain differences. What is the differences you find? What are certain differences you find? So obviously you can say in the Greek idea of justice in that regard, it is not premised strongly based on God or religion. But if you look at Hindu political thought, it's strongly premised on what? Religion and God. So you cannot clearly separate both of them. The other point of difference you can say that in the Greek idea of justice, when you look at, especially some scholars, for example Plato, in that regard he had included women in the position to rule, which was not largely seen in the Hindu political thought. So the other thing you say is that the idea of justice, like Greeks, they had certain modern ideas. So for example you can say Aristotle speaks about distributive justice, Aristotle exclusively speaks about retributive justice, okay. But these kind of modern ideas were not clearly visible in the Indian political thought. But nevertheless you can say you cannot completely separate the Greek and Hindu philosophy, they are closely intertwined. And you can also write something like Pythagoras, who had visited India, also had taken back with him what? The transmigration of soul, and that deeply influenced Plato's what? Theory of soul. Something like that you can write in your conclusion. Got it? So these kind of questions, what will happen? You can't write a perfect answer in the exam hall. You have to write on the spot to your best extent what you can write. Got it? Why I'm telling is that don't always imagine that every question you will write the best possible answer. It won't be possible in an actual given exam. On the spot, whatever you can think, try to link it. It should be more also relevant to the points you are making. Understood? You understood the diversity of Plato's questions, what we did. So we have dealt with different types of questions. Some questions which are what? Quotes directly told by Plato. Some questions what? Quote told by the third person on Plato. Some questions are what? Comparison and contrast questions, what they're asking. But you will have to know different approaches that how you can write. And in these kind of questions, it is possible to write in point format if you want to write. Or you can also use short paragraph format. Instead of you don't want to write a point, use it as a short paragraph. But for every question there should be an introduction, there should be a conclusion. So how do you improve your writing speed? Which pen if you use you can write fast? There is no pen. Improve your thinking speed. If you improve your thinking speed, then your writing speed will automatically increase. You understand? So why you take more time in exam? Because you have to think. Okay, but if you have done that thinking at this stage itself, once you enter the examination hall, there is minimal thinking. It's more about reflection of what you have already thought about it. So what you have to do is that you have to reflect upon whatever you have read. Okay, think about what are the areas they can ask question. It's not that question will come. Even if that question has not come, already you have thought about it. Those ideas will help you somewhere else to frame an argument, to frame an answer. The only thing what you can take with you is keywords, key scholars name, etc. And here also if you see, we have not made too much use of scholars. Where it is required, there we have organically linked. So my job is not to include how many scholars I can include in my answer, 10 different scholars. Not required. You understood? Not required. Why do you need so many scholars? It's only where it is very relevant you will have to include. So got an idea? Only I took Plato a bit of time. Why? Because it was the first session. So you need to get an understanding what are the different areas the question will come. But we'll pick up the pace with coming scholars. Like what is the next scholar who is there in your syllabus? Aristotle. Now quickly tell me what is the work written by Aristotle? What are the key words, key works that you will write in your answer? His most important work is what? Politics, which is another important work. Encomium, ethics. Right. Aristotle is also called as what? Father of political science. Okay, and what you can say? Aristotle is also what you can say considered as one of the greatest what? Greatest Platonist. Okay. Now, what are the themes? I'll have to know from the exam point of view. One theme question can be asked about relation between whom? Between Aristotle and Plato. This is one theme question can come. The other theme what they can ask question on? Aristotle's views on state. What is the other theme? Think about what are the important themes of Aristotle. Aristotle view of citizenship. Aristotle's view on slavery. Aristotle's classification of what? Of constitution. Then what else? They can ask about civic republicanism, means people should participate. That's a broader idea that you can link. Then his views on revolution. Then his view of justice. Yeah, the rule of law will include in his views on state itself. Got it? So these are the areas. Or one more type of question that can come is on his methodology of understanding politics. In the terms, one year they've asked Machiavelli as the forerunner of behavioralism. They can ask the same thing to Aristotle also. In what ways Aristotle is considered as the forerunner of behavioralism? Understood? Constitutionalism. Got it? So one question can be directly on Aristotle. Here also the question format, quote. Which quote? Aristotle only has told that quote. One more quote is what? On what others have told about Aristotle. The third aspect is what? Cleanly they can ask about directly keywords of the theory, comment on Aristotle's view on state. The other what they can ask? Comparison based questions, relevance based questions, application in future areas. These are the areas where the questions have come. So let us look into certain questions based on these themes that has been asked, starting from his relation between Aristotle and what? Plato. So take down this question and let us see that how you will look into it. So take down the question here as explain Aristotle's criticism of Plato's idealism. Explain Aristotle's criticism of Plato's idealism. What will you write for this question? Explain Aristotle's criticism of Plato's idealism. This has been asked for 20 marks. So tell me, how will you address this question? So yeah, when you write your introduction, you can say that Aristotle is considered as one of the greatest Platonists. But the reason you write, even nobody has told you write, the reason is that even though you can say there is a considerable influence of Plato and Aristotle's writings, but yet you can say Aristotle has also reshaped Plato's ideas. That is your introduction. Then what will you write? They're asking, explain Aristotle's criticism of Plato's idealism. So what do you mean by Plato's idealism? There is nothing to overthink. Simple. It is Plato's ideas. Okay. What are the important Plato's ideas? The ideas of philosopher king. The views on what? Laws. Where what Plato said, no law is mightier than the knowledge of the philosopher king. Plato also spoke about communism of wives and property. Plato also spoke about theory of forms. Now, first you explain this briefly in one paragraph or 1.5 paragraph. Now you bring about explain what is Aristotle's criticism. Go one by one. What was Aristotle's criticism of theory of forms? He told, he agreed with it, but he told every form is form of something. You cannot completely separate the real world and the the world of ideas and the material world. Second criticism is what? Regarding laws. Aristotle disagreed with Plato. He told you cannot place the philosopher king above the laws. He strongly advocated for what? Rule of laws. Because Aristotle believed that what? Power will ultimately corrupt any person. Power corrupts, and power can corrupt person absolutely. Then you can write about his criticism of communism of wives and property. He called it impractical idea. Why is an impractical idea? For Aristotle, both family and private property are what? Time-tested institutions. Family plays a key role in what? Political socialization, helps in development of values among an individual. And he also believed that private property also adds stability to the society. It's an incentive for hardworking individuals. So hence you can say both will have to continue for the stability of the state. Then he also criticized the philosopher king. Why? Because he believed that collective wisdom is any day better than wisdom of any one particular person. Hence in many ways you can say Aristotle was not in agreement without Plato's ideas, because he told these ideas were too radical and it was impractical. And that is why what Aristotle said, we need a ruler who does not belong to the world of ideas, but a ruler who is more practical. And hence you can say that these criticism of Aristotle had also influenced Plato, because Plato remodified many of his ideas in his second work, what he wrote, that is the Laws. And hence we say that in your conclusion you can add, it is popularly said. What it is popularly said? Aristotle's best state is Plato's second best state. Aristotle's best state is what? Plato's second best state. Understand? The question can come like this also. This can only come as a question in one of the exam. Aristotle's best state is Plato's second best state. Comment. That time what will you write? You cannot say I'll write ulta no whatever. No, you can't write. Here you have to write. First explain in your answer which is Aristotle's best state. Which is it? Polity. You have to explain what is polity. You have to explain the features of polity. Rule of law, active participation of citizens, collective wisdom, etc. etc. Then you will have to write how this becomes Plato's second best state. So which was Plato's first best state? Republic. But later, because he found it impractical, he accommodated many of Aristotle's ideas, and his new work, what he wrote, Laws, he reformed these ideas. That is why we say it is the second best state. Got it? So any question on relation between Aristotle and Plato can be shaped this way. They can ask one more question. Take down this. This is not asked, just I am telling probable question. Every page Aristotle writes. Every page Aristotle writes bears the imprint of Plato. Every page Aristotle writes bears the imprint of Plato. Dunning. Every page Aristotle writes. Every page Aristotle writes bears the imprint of Plato. Imprint of Plato. Dunning. Let us take 10 marks. They ask you to comment. Okay. So now what is the use of solving questions or etc. Tomorrow let us think there is some question on Aristotle and Plato. Use this as your introduction or conclusion. Every page Aristotle writes, it has imprint of Plato. But let us think this is a question they have asked. Now how will you write? 10 marks, 150 words. Just tell me the structure, that is enough. If you know the structure, content will flow. Simple. You have to write one part, what is the influence of Plato on Aristotle. Second part, simple. Second part, you can say how Aristotle has differed with certain ideas. So differed part, you know, just now because we wrote the criticism. What is the similarity? How Plato has influenced Aristotle? Simple, you can say view of state. Both have the organic view of state. They believe that state is the end, individual is the means. Then both are critical of sophist philosophy. Then think what ways they are similar. Both gives importance to reason, knowledge, because they give that reason or knowledge is most important for the what? Greeks. Then what ways they are similar? Think both will say that you cannot separate ethics and politics. Ethics and politics are closely intertwined. And both believe in what? Inequality is natural. Understand? But in what ways they are different? Even though there is everything Plato, but still Aristotle differs from Plato. In what ways? Simple, no need to know. Plato subscribed to a model of government that was based on rule of philosopher king, where he told unless philosopher becomes kings, kings learn the art of philosophy, world will not rest from its evils, which Aristotle differed. He told which is a more practical form of government, which is based on rule of law, which is based on civic republicanism. Second, what? He believed that Plato, private property and family should be completely eliminated. For whom? The ruling class. But what did Aristotle believe? Same na, both private property and family are time tested institutions. That is highly important for the evolution and development of a society. Third, Plato was much more forward thinking compared to Aristotle because he allowed women to participate in public affairs, unlike Aristotle who told women do not have any role to play in politics, they are limited to household work. Understand? Then any other difference? Any other difference? What you can think of? That is run civic republicanism. Any other point you can think of where Plato and Aristotle differed? That's the method of classification, but end of the day both believe that inequality is what? Natural. Very good. When you look at Plato's methodology, it is more philosophical. When you look at Aristotle's way of looking at politics, it is much more scientific. But in spite of these differences, one cannot deny that Aristotle is one of the greatest Platonist. So you can write something like, the shadow of his master never faded from his mind. Alright. You understand? So in all these kind of questions, it's more about articulation and ability to bring more points. And that's why I told you will have to do a bit of brainstorming. You have to think. You understand? There's a difference between reading and thinking. So in 2015, when I wrote my mains, in 2014 and 2015, both time I got political science below 200. Okay, 1 year I got 197 or something, 1 year I got 180. Those 2 years were the years I had read the most. You understand? Read the most, it's not I'm telling only Shubhra ma'am notes. It was like Shashi Tharoor's Pax Indica, David Malone's Elephant Kandans, every material what is there, you name it, I had read it. Rajni Kotari's Caste and Politics, I had read that book. I read. I never understood what was there in that book. And when I went and wrote the exam, I always used to feel I have lack of content. I didn't know how to approach it. But in 2016, when I wrote my mains, I had made one small change. Because I think many of you know, one of my friend in 2015, when we wrote together, his option was Kannada literature. He had shifted to political science. That was the first ever time he wrote. Just before mains he shifted, means while applying. And he had only studied for 3 months. Only for 3 months. It's no exaggeration because I was there with him now. Only for 3 months. And that year he got All India rank 48. He's the current Mangalore DC, Darshan HV. And he scored 281 in PSIR. I scored 180 something, 100 marks difference. And with me, what reading all these books, David Malone's, Pax Indica, etc. And he, that fellow, nothing, notes. But he had done a lot of answer writing practice. You understand? So when scores came out, I was shocked, literally shocked. Like, how is this possible? How this fellow can read in such short duration of time? But when I had a discussion with him later, that is where I understood where I was going wrong. It was application. I had never done brainstorming. He had done a lot of brainstorming. I'll give you an example. That year, I think in 2015, if I'm not wrong, they had asked a question. Okay, in part B, political science. Dilemmas of human rights movements in India. Comment. I looked at the question. My mindset was like this. Where it is there in the book, it is not given only now. What is this dilemmas of human rights movement? I wrote whatever I know about human rights. Human rights, Immanuel Kant spoke that human rights declaration came on this day in human rights. Some nonsense. I wrote something. So basically I asked this fellow because he had scored 154 in paper 1 and he was the all India topper that year. That's the shocking part. It's not just he cleared it. He was paper 1 topper. Tina Dabi was the PSIR topper. She got 299. He got 281. But paper 1 he had scored more because Tina Dabi scored more in paper 2. So I told him, what did you write? He gave an answer which you would have never thought in any book. So he told, what is the meaning of human rights dilemma? What is the meaning of dilemma? What does dilemma refers to? Confusion. So they are asking, what is the confusion in human rights movement in India? Why there is a confusion? So I wrote about that. I told, what did you write? He told, India is a multicultural society. There are different religion, different castes, different tribal groups practicing different traditions. So what comes under human rights is not commonly, that is only debatable. For example, you can say Sabrimala issue in that regard, whether entering the temple is the rights of the women compared as human right, or it's also part of the community, saying that these are right, these are practices. Second one, questions such as what these abortions, etc. Whether the women, feminist groups have complete right over their body, or whether the fetus also has certain rights. Environmental and developmental issues. Why? Because on one basic thing, human right is also what? Economic development. But on the other hand, protecting culture of the tribal communities, that is also important. And that is what he told. These are the dilemmas we find in human rights movement in India. Then I came to know why I got 188, why that fellow got 281. And that is what I changed my approach in 2016 and I got 284. Anyway, it's not big change. I cut down all my content. I just minimized my content. I spent more time on what? Brainstorming, writing a lot of previous year questions, thinking about it. What should I write? That I felt what there was no need to panic. Even when they ask a question, I will be able to still write. Why? Because I know how to tackle the question. You understand? Some people, see last year also I think 3 months back, we had this topper session from Dishant and Nishant. Many of the people who attended the session, their question is that how did you write the question on what is that pink red lipstick movement? Had you read about it? He told no, I didn't read about it. I wrote a general point. But you need to understand one question will not determine your fate. He ended up getting 290 in PSIR. Even he has not written a good answer for red lipstick movement. But that alone will not determine you not getting 300. Many people think that because of that question their full prospect got no. They would have not written basic questions well. Understand? And that's why I told it's a very relative subject. Relative in the sense what is a good answer varies from person to person and based on our understanding. So obviously we need to address the demand. When somebody reads your answer, they should feel organically connected. Okay, this fellow has understood the topic. He has given a lot of his own examples. But when you're a bookworm, what will happen? You just always think from a book point of view. What is there in my notes? Got it? The notes is mainly meant for what? Giving you an idea. Right? When you read notes, you'll understand what is Marxism. You'll understand different varieties of Marxism. Neo-Marxist, classical Marxist. You understand? But how do you apply it, etc. That depends upon the question. And what they're doing now, this time is that they're making questions increasingly what? Applied. If you see last time what they've asked, I think before time, Marxism needs to stick to its core principles, something like that they've given. So there, when you analyze and read, you have to tell who is saying that. The statement goes something like that. Marxism requires you to stick to its core principles. Now you tell me who would have told this statement? From which perspective this statement would have come? If you logically think. Who would argue that you need to stick to the core principles? Classical Marxist. Why they would have told like that? The reason is that there is always a debate within Marxism. Why did Marxism did not completely succeed? The debate always lies between the classical Marxist and the neo-Marxist. Neo-Marxists blame it on classical Marxists, saying that you stuck to the core principle, you did not modify the idea according to changing condition. That is why Marxism or the revolution did not happen. Gramsci. But if you look at classical Marxists, what they say, Lenin, Stalin, they all brought revolution, but that did not result in a communist society. Why? Because they did not stick to the core principle of Marxism. They deviated away from the core principle of Marxism. That is why dictatorship of proletariat did not result in what? Classless and a stateless society. It led to what? Dictatorship of proletariat led to dictatorship of one party that ultimately led to dictatorship of one person. So you need to understand a context. If you understand the context, then you will be able to write very good answers. But without understanding the context, when you just try to plainly approach, right? And that is why many people will feel that we have done well. But when you look at the scores will be not reflecting it. Understood? So that's why I said all you need to do is that develop the approaches. Got it? So in tomorrow's class, we'll finish Aristotle and we'll go into Machiavelli, Locke and Hobbes. This was the first session, that is why I went a bit slow. But in next session, I'll pick up the pace. Because again I told, because here my job you need to understand, not explaining you or making, I'll only explain important value addition theories when it comes. Okay, but here I'll not sit and explain you what did Aristotle theory of slavery, etc. I'll directly go into the question and what you could have written. Got it? So tomorrow again, the session will be at 11 a.m. 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Got it? Because I'll need 15 to 20 days to complete this session, and especially for IR, it will be more of what? Recent issues what will take up. Probable questions will be more in IR part. Here it will be more of what? PYQs. But yeah, some probable question also we can think about what can come in the exam. Got it? Any doubt you have in what we discussed today? Understood? So since today was the first session, we have not given you questions, but tomorrow I'll give you questions to write before we wrap up the session on 5 or 4 questions on that topic. With the time limit, you have to be able to write it. Got it? See, that's what I told. Initially you can write 1 question, 2 question, it is fine. But write. Understand? Don't wait saying that. See, that's what I told. If you're a very newcomer, not read political, then this session is not for you. This is only for whom? Those who have completed 1 round of reading or 2 rounds of reading. So they can get. But even they say that, no sir, I have to revise. No, you will have to write. Carry in mind, There will be always reluctance within you to write. That you have to shed. Got it? So topics only I'm telling before only. You can revise and come. Tomorrow we are going to do Aristotle, Machiavelli, Locke, Hobbes and Mill. These thinkers we are going to do. Be prepared. Come. Got it? We'll be solving a lot of questions on it.